And that's it. Great. So good morning, Robyn. Thank you. Thanks very much for being willing to do this interview, and more to the point, thanks ever so for coming to be our keynote speaker at our conference. I'll just remind myself of the date. Yes, the 22nd to the 25th of November. I'm delighted that you're going to be kind of heading up as our main keynote speaker.
You're welcome. I'm very, very happy to be coming and to be a part of the conference.
Great. And the keynote speech is something that I'm really looking forward to speaking with you about. And I did think we might start first by just speaking about the other things that you're going to be doing as well. I note that you're going to be offering a 2-day advanced stroke intermediate workshop. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. I think that there are a fair number of very good introductory workshops, and they set the tone and the pace and provide a lot of good experiential work on what's happening in acceptance and commitment therapy. But as I've trained across time, I've come to think that we really do need to go deeper into our training and to focus more on the processes and the function of behavior. So the intent in this workshop will be to do just that, just to take a much closer look at least 4 levels of processes inside of the therapy, and to also take a look at how to examine the function of behavior in a useful way in the therapy session.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. So you're calling it Advancing Through Use of the Therapeutic Relationship and Implementing the Processes with Flexibility and Effectiveness. And it's great to hear that, the use of the therapeutic relationship. Could you speak a bit more about that as well?
Sure. I think that one of the risks that we have in implementing the therapy is that we pull down a metaphor or an exercise, and we think about doing it with the client, and it sort of has, I'm going to an applied to this client sense. And it misses the context and the interpersonal relationship and the issues that the client is bringing to the therapeutic room. And so part of what I want to do is look at how all of these events, the therapy, the client and the therapist are participating in the therapeutic relationship.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So the theme of the conference is building bridges, and I think that's what excites me about ACT, is that it is so wonderful for inviting in kind of perspectives from other traditions as well that find their place in the ACT model of working. And I distinctly recall the first time I came to a workshop of yours in 2007, being so impressed by what looked to me your work at a deep relational level that reminded me of a person-centered therapist that I knew much more about at the time. And it's great to hear that you're going to be kind of passing on that natural sort of touch, that natural ability that you seem to have.
Well, thank you. I hope I am able to communicate that and assist others in working with that process and thinking about things like, how does person-centered therapy or humanistic therapy or existential therapy, gestalt therapy fit into, when you think about building bridges, how do all of those things combine and fit into some of the work that we're doing in ACT?
Yeah, great. And so that perhaps brings us to one of the other roles that you'll be having, which is in a plenary, I think. Is that right? That you'll be managing. It's a panel, an invited panel, isn't it? With regard to points of connection and distinction with other therapies. I think this is probably still in a formulating stage at the moment, but what are your thoughts on that at the moment?
Sorry, I just, my home, right in the middle of the interview.
Oh, no worries.
This is try to plan things to
There
make
we
them
go.
go well, right?
I shall definitely have to do a little bit of editing then.
Or we can just leave it in
Oh,
and
we can
folks.
leave it in. Let's leave it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Either way.
Even keynote speakers have domestic telephones, don't they?
Oh, that's very funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
well, so I'm looking forward to this panel
Mm.
and challenging us to think about how some of these things might be integrated. When ACT first launched back in the late 80s and early 90s, there's a fair amount of distinguishing it from cognitive therapy.
Sure.
And some of that was a bit rough. There were times when there was a little bit of heat behind, what the differences between the two interventions were. And I think that we have morphed in a really positive way and are now moving forward and thinking about how can we work and bridge amongst these different theories and ideas, and where do we line up, and how can we support and assist each other. And essentially we all have the idea of helping humans who are suffering. And so it's nice for me to see that many of those arguments have settled, and now to start thinking about how we're linked and how we can bridge to each other.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. I don't know who the other people will be as yet. We've certainly got quite a few fellow travellers. I know we weren't able to get as many people from distinctly other traditions as we'd hoped, but nonetheless, there's bridges and differences and distinctions to make between the people that we've got coming.
Terrific.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, look, let's move on to what rather excites me, as you know, and that's your keynote speech. Could you remind me of the title you've given it?
Yes, I'm going to read it directly just so that I make sure that I'm able to say it correctly, so that folks won't be wondering if they're watching this video.
Yes.
The title is, I'm just getting to it now, Living Life from the Feet Up, Creating Well-Being in the Larger Context of Earth, Animal, and Humans.
Fantastic. And there's some, it's slightly mysterious as well as a sort of a call to action in there for me as well. But from the feet up, could you say a little about that? Yeah,
it's a bit of a new slogan for me. Although hopefully slogan doesn't sound too dismissive. When I think about what needs to happen and when I relate it to what we're doing inside of ACT, is that, we can move in a spiritual direction with what's happening in the earth. We can move with the earth. We can move in a thoughtful direction. We can have discourse about it. But really, the place where things are going to start to change is when we start moving with our feet and taking action in ways that are powerful and important and interlinked. And I think interlinked around the globe, that we need to get connected to each other and see what we're doing. Not to say that we shouldn't continue the discourse and the spiritual and intellectual pursuits, but that our feet need to get on the ground and actually taking action if we're going to make a change.
Oh, that's fantastic. I guess most of us came into this work with an intention to heal, to assist the healing of other individuals, and that lovely phrase of that 2012 paper. What was it? Creating a science more adequate to the challenge of the human condition. I think, when we think of it in terms of one-to-one work, that reminds us and brings us back to therapy. But your title is as broadly kind of containing as it possibly could be in terms of life on the planet, and the idea of our mission being extended as wide as that is very exciting and also very daunting.
Yes. And as you'll see in the keynote, I won't give away the ending of my talk, but that I'm going to very specifically bring up that piece that you just read, the title, and
All right.
very, very directly invite us to expand the way we think about helping.
In 1992, James Hillman and Francis Varela wrote a book called 100 Years of Psychotherapy and the World is Still Getting No Better, or something like that. Here it is. Here's the title. We've had 100 years of psychotherapy and the world's getting worse. And that was 1992. Yes, well, it sounds quite prescient, really, doesn't it? And yet, here we are saying we are creating a science, better to better address the human condition, and the human condition in this 21st century is perilous. I think when we were speaking earlier, you spoke about the 7 signs of a species species that are on the edge of extinction. Could you remind me what your insight was there with regard to the human race?
Sure. Well, I'm going to attribute this to Joe Brewer, who I listened to the ACBS conference. Who gave a marvelous talk, and if people have the opportunity to go and listen to the panel on changing capitalism, which will be on I'll give a plug for the ACBS conference. That was a recorded session, and the whole session was really interesting. And one of the things that Joe Brewer pointed out was that there are 7 signs that indicate a species collapse, and according to him, we've passed 4 of them as a human species. And if I think more broadly about what's happening to us, and I'm going to tie it to a conversation that you and I have been having, as a wicked problem.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've done, and maybe psychology will be moving in a different direction, is we've sort of narrowly defined what it means to have well-being. And we think about decreasing suffering or removing symptoms, and it's very focused on the human psychology. But one of the things about ACBS and contextual behavioral science is that we really can look outside of that individual psychology and start to think about how our environment impacts us. And that if we go bigger, we can think about how losing a species on an African continent affects us individually, that we are related, interconnected to the earth. And, we've had a very kind of narrow focus, and I've appreciated what contextualism can do for all of us to expand that focus, and maybe well-being and solving the wicked problem that we have, if you want to talk about that at all, is we've got to expand and consider what is well-being and who is it for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, I sometimes think of this sort of wonderful existence we have as being like on spaceship Earth in a way, zooming through the cosmos, and our scientists have for some time been saying, hey, the life support system is packing up, and yet somehow or another the vast majority of the passengers and the other crew members, for that matter, kind of don't want to be bothered with that. It's so important to keep the ship moving at the pace and the rate and the velocity and the direction that it's going in. And yet that is certainly the context, isn't it? And if we are addressing the context in which suffering happens, then we can see that the context is going to imminently develop a great deal more suffering for all species.
For all species, that's right. If we don't if we don't make significant and very important changes, and some people are talking about things like sustainable capitalism or sustainable development, and I'm making the argument that sustainable development is basically an oxymoron. We need to make a sustainable retreat.
Yes.
And, but it's very hard. We have comfortable lives, and it means as human beings, we're going to have to make some pretty difficult and life-changing decisions and some movement with our feet to change things and shift things around. And, you know, it's been challenging to think about what we can do. And I think there's been a fair amount of hopelessness or helplessness or passiveness. And I think that there is hope. But we really do need to take some action, not just for ourselves, but for Earth, animals, and planet.
Yes, absolutely. I was thinking about, you know, your part of the world, and the, you know, the people, the original inhabitants, and in particular the Lakota, I think, who spoke of, when making important decisions for the tribe, to consider the results of seven generations ahead. It's hard to imagine, isn't it, sometimes, 7 generations ahead for us, when, you know, our most significant decision makers are basically concentrating on the results of the next election rather than 7 generations ahead.
Well, and, you know, Martin, I listened to that Wicked Problems piece, and I was fascinated by one of the comments. Remind me who the gentleman who wrote Wicked Problems.
Watkins, Alan Watkins. With Ken Wilber.
Yeah, and one of the things that he was saying was that people get into really thinking about what's going to benefit them, and in that process can destroy or really make a lot of suffering for others. And he mentioned that about 50 people contributed to the 2008 collapse of the economy.
That's a great one, yeah.
It's a good example of how that happens, where people get very self-oriented in terms of their own benefit, and then don't, in a pro-social way, think about how does this impact the people around me, and I'm going to keep expanding that, and how does it impact the animals around me and the plants around me and the place where I walk and live. You know, that we need to think more broadly and have a much larger view of what well-being is about.
Yeah. You spoke about the wicked problem, and the idea that just to expand on that, the idea that a wicked problem has, in a way, sort of 6 multiplicities, which distinguishes it from an ordinary complex problem. There's no doubt humankind has very, very many complex problems, but it has 1 or 2 very significant wicked problems that fit this definition of 6 multiplicities. Multidimensional being one of them, and I suppose we've spoken of that in a way. ACT, with its a kind of identity as a therapy, we might think of as being focused on an individual, as a sort of me working with this person, in the perhaps the I realm. But then we think of it in another dimension, which is the we realm, and I guess this is perhaps where I got quite excited about the pro-social initiative, and thinking of ACT being applied to organisations, and I felt really moved and wanted to get on board with that. And I guess what I've begun to recognise is that works for kind of groups that are already somewhat switched on, that do have a sense of altruism in their value selections, I suppose, because one of the other multiples is the multiple stakeholders. We were speaking about that, weren't we, just recently, and that the idea that if we think of a normal distribution curve, at one end of it, there are change agents, and certainly keynote speakers who speak on this are change agents. There is another group of people that we might call early adopters, people who've been recycling their bottles for years and will be doing other things that they feel contribute. And then there are passive supporters who think it's a good idea, but it's a bit troublesome, and it somewhat messes up the desperate struggle they have to keep up with business as usual. And then there are the skeptics that perhaps think it's a conspiracy, or maybe genuinely feel that it's something to do with Earth's cycles, and humans can't do anything about that. And then right at the far end of the normal distribution curve, there are the active resistors. You spoke of an infamous pair of billionaire brothers who have been pouring a lot of funds into resistance, and so amongst those stakeholders, the pro-social endeavour would seem, kind of perhaps best in terms of working with change agents and early adopters, I guess. And how do you see contextual behavioural science perhaps reaching to the other stakeholders, and particularly those stakeholders who are deeply invested in the business as usual model, because they're getting great advantage from it?
Well, my fear is, and I hope that this is not the case. I hope that we are able to move in a direction that that prevents this, but we'll see. Is that some pretty drastic and quite terrible things might have to happen before those folks are convinced that we're in a bad state. There are many things I'm going to talk about in the keynote in terms of losses to the planet that are astounding. And bringing all of that information together in one place can feel overwhelming.
True.
Very much lead to avoidance. And, one of the problems that we have with capitalism, or the way we've defined success in the modern world, is that it's about having things and getting money. And that sort of notion keeps people running at a very fast pace. And when am I going to have time to do the thing that needs to be done? So one of my fears is that something quite awful is going to have to occur. I hope that's not the case. I think that there are many things happening already, that the early adopters and the folks invested in change are making movement, and there's many good things happening in pockets around the world. And what we need to do is get these people talking to each other, exchanging ideas, and then we need to bring folks into the process and get everybody talking about what we can do. Maybe that's an idealistic, but many people working together can make a change, and just need to get these folks connected. And I think that we can make movement. And, for a short period of time, I sort of fell into a place where let me back up just a little bit. I've always sort of had this notion that people are inherently good, that we are pro-social by nature. If you look at the evolutionary aspects of that, it makes complete sense, right? That we are pro-social by nature. But we've supported a lot of individualistic and selfish movement. And there's parts about being selfish that are also helpful. I mean, this is a complex issue, right? This is not an easy thing to talk about. But I sort of lost for a period of time after looking at all the different things that are happening to the world and the major losses that we've had, plant and animal. And they're significant. And I'll share that information when we're during the keynote. I started to think maybe we weren't inherently good, and had a period of hopelessness. But I have shifted, and I'm back into a time of hope. And I think that we have the capacity to do significant and important things that will change the direction of what's happening to our Earth and planet and ourselves. And so my hope is that I'll be able to share that journey with those who attend the conference, and that people will be both worried and inspired, and then ready to take action.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, that's a rallying call. And given that we have such a kind of growing relationship with the evolutionary perspective in ACBS, I find an excitement in thinking of the whole mindfulness tradition, really, the capacity that we're growing societally already, that we are growing in bulk, not just in ashrams, but in sort of meeting rooms in every town and city now, growing the capacity to be able to observe our inner experiencing and our outer behaviors. And if we think of ourselves as human beings, okay, it might be a bit anthropocentric, but we don't really know of any other kind of cognizant beings in our universe just yet. But if we think of ourselves as a breaking wave of evolution, then we are also at a point where we can begin to take a conscious part in giving evolution a steer. And if we're not, if we don't step up to that moment, then this little sort of human sort of excursion into the evolutionary breaking wave will have been a cul-de-sac. That's how it seems. And yet, the challenge is here, and speaking as you will to a large group of really kind of switched on people who perhaps maybe feeling a little hopeless, it's just too big for me, or it's too late, or the systems and institutions are just so dumb that we can't do anything. If we can share that inspiration as you're hoping to, then we are change agents in an evolutionary fashion.
Absolutely. And my hope is that that there will be a true inspiration, and that each person who attends and listens and can reach out to someone next to them and get, when they go back home, and get them to reach out and attend and do something, and they get the CBS community itself thinking about these things and moving in this direction. And we currently have a Facebook page called the ACBS Warriors, and I should say that it's named after a group of Native American women who took on a cause and made significant change. And so I know warriors is sometimes a bit of a controversial term, but we really did it based on that we can take on a very large cause. It's saving ourselves and our planet and make a difference. And so it would invite people to visit the page. It's just getting sort of launched and limping along. There are things that we need to just get more people involved and grow it. And I think CBS is nicely set in terms of contextual thinking for us to link to other organizations and people who are engaged in behaviors that are about making a difference, and we can grow that inside of our own association.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Oh, Robyn, that's fantastic. Should we? Do you think we should leave it there? It's got a buzz to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, very
Great.
I'm really looking forward to coming and joining everyone in the conference. I think it's going to be fantastic, and I want to thank you for taking time to chat with me today.
Oh, thank you too, and we'll see you there. This is going to go out to all our, to whatever kind of channels, social networking we can think of. So let's invite everybody in. Welcome aboard, everyone. Great.
Welcome. See you in November.
Yeah, great. Thanks then. Cheers. Now I'm just going to switch the record.
Okay.
Off here at this point. So I'll have to edit that bit.